Welcome to Channel 18 News. I'm Jim Rogers. Walter Lee Robertson, age 66, is back in Hopkins County Jail after several years away. Robertson is held for violation of probation for felony arson. Robertson was arrested in the Dallas County Jail and transported back to Hopkins County. In 2006, Robertson received a deferred probation for second-degree felony arson. According to Hopkins County Sheriff's records, he had written his half-sister a letter telling her that she'd been talking about him and she'd better watch out. The half-sister lived in the rented house on County Road 2321 that was burned. The house belonged to a local dairyman. Robertson was convicted in 2006 of the arson, given the 10 years deferred, but in 2008 he violated probation then. He's back for violation of probation again. Bill Bradford Road will be a concrete roadway following the vote of the Sulphur Springs City Council during their Tuesday night meeting. The city accepted the low bid for the concrete and for stabilizing the roadway. The budget for the road reconstruction is now $1.7 million. When the street that has become a major artery in the city is completed, it will include a total rework of water and sewer lines, as well as new curb and gutter and roadway. According to City Manager Mark Maxwell in his manager's report, the work on Bill Bradford Road is moving at a quicker pace now that a capital construction crew has completed a separate project and now assigned to the work on the street. As the Sons of the American Revolution presented the colors for the opening of the City Council session Tuesday night, the four representatives of the SAR were dressed in reenactment uniform. Following the pledge to the United States flag and the Texas flag, they presented a flag certificate to Mayor Kayla Price in one of her last acts as mayor. As the council session opened, a proclamation was read by Mayor Price honoring the Sulphur Springs Middle School students and their coaches for their World Championship at Destination Imagination Competition. Councilman Freddie Taylor and Councilwoman Emily Glass were sworn in by City Secretary Gail Robertson just before Glass was elected mayor. Clay Walker was elected mayor pro tem. The council voted to approve a request for rezoning of property located at 520 Davis Street from multifamily to light commercial, but denied a request for property at 610 South Davis Street to be rezoned from single-family to two-family dwelling after residents for the property or around the property protested the change. Even though the duplex could be a 4,000 square foot house with 2,000 square feet for living area in each side and on a zero-line lot, a former city councilman, Mike Meese, stated that the change in the neighborhood was unwelcomed. He called the neighborhood an area of longtime residents who took pride in their homes and the neighborhood had been established. In public forum, Frankie Hawkins, a Carter Street resident, presented council with a drainage issue that affects homes along their street. City Manager Mark Maxwell told Mr. Hawkins that the city engineers would be dispatched to investigate the complaint and find a solution, and at the conclusion of the council meeting, City Development Director Shane Shepard told KSST News that he had already texted an engineer and assigned them to the task. Brandon Williams was introduced as the Hopkins County United Way campaign chair for 2016-2017 during a meeting of the board Wednesday in the AgriLife Building conference room. Ruth Ann Crouston and Rusty Harden were also introduced as new United Way board members.
I'll start off by introducing our new board members, Rusty Harden and Ruth Ann Crouston. Yay! Thank you all for serving. And I also want to introduce Brandon Williams. He's our 2016-2017 campaign chair. Do you want to give a campaign report?
Sure. So we'll introduce or acknowledge the allocations committee here in a second on the agenda, but just from an update standpoint, Susan has done an outstanding job as usual coordinating some of the logistics associated with this, but lead donor luncheon, September 28th, Sulphur Springs Country Club. Workers luncheon, September 21st at the Dairy Museum. And then this is where I give my shameless plug for campaign volunteers, local media. Y'all can help with that, and y'all can even volunteer too if you want to. If you have time, you probably don't, but this year's theme is going to be Finish Strong. And I have, y'all know Israel Lewis. I've talked to him. That's his shtick. He motivates a lot of people and inspires a lot of people with some of his things on social media, and ties in some scripture and biblical principles, and really does a nice job of tying those things in. And I figured with this thing, Finish Strong would be appropriate, because there's folks that have gone through a tough time and they need some help. And it's not about where you've been, but it's about where you're going. So I've asked him to help and be our speaker, and I asked if I could steal his MO in life and finish strong. It's even on his license plate. He said, absolutely, it's perfect. So there we are.
He's going to be the speaker.
He's going to be the guest speaker at our luncheon.
CEO luncheon.
That's it. That's correct. From a budget and allocations committee, myself, Price, Melissa Pittman, Beverly Owens, Dr. Baucom, Todd McKee, and Mike Horn. We met about a month ago and spent a couple of days in here, and Susan was here as well. But we met a couple of days and listened to folks requesting funding, and made some allocations decisions and things like that as well. So we wanted to thank them for dedicating a couple of days of their time as well.
Then you set a goal.
Yes, good question. $165,000 is our campaign goal this year. And that's all I have from an update standpoint, Bryce.
Mark Twain. He lived from 1835 to 1910. He was an American author and humorist. While Hopkins County's own Larry Davis portrays Mark Twain for audiences, and he has since his college days. He's also an author and humorist. Now he's going to retire his show, and he'll make a final appearance this Saturday, June 11th, at the Riley Springs Community Center as Mark Twain, and it's a fundraiser for volunteer fire departments. Let's meet this interesting entertainer.
I've written a trilogy of works based in Fairleigh, Texas, and one of my big thrills in life was Carolyn Burt Brown, or Brown Burt, who was a professor at Texas A&M Commerce, had me back out to do a reading in Fairleigh of works based in Fairleigh, and we had about 60 people show up at the little community center there, and that was a real thrill for that. And I've done readings of that all over it. It has proven every bit as popular, maybe more popular than the Mark Twain show.
Well, you are going to be appearing for everybody this Saturday night at the Riley Springs Community Center, which of course is the home of the Jamboree there. And it will be at 7 o'clock.
Yep.
Admission $10. Right. You'll present your Mark Twain. What do you call it?
Well, I say services begin at 7.
Okay.
Because he had a real active and long and very profitable career as a comedian. Most people don't know that. Traveled Europe, traveled all over the U.S. 3 times he faced bankruptcy, and he was good enough at it that he was able to avoid bankruptcy by going on what he called lecture tours.
Okay.
And that's the reason the Kennedy Center now presents an award for comedy. Eddie Murphy, Jay Leno, Johnny Carson have all won it. And it's called the Mark Twain Award for American Humor. Okay. Because in my opinion, he's the funniest guy this country ever produced, as well as being the prolific writer that he was.
Well, did he present his humor in sort of a deadpan expression?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
That's why I didn't know he was funny.
He did. He was hilarious. The Dallas Morning News, it's been 10 years ago or 12 years ago now, I had a picture. They were wanting to identify who the guy was. I never called in and told them, but it was a picture sitting on a horse who was lying down in the street. A way of saying, he was riding a dead horse. Well, it was Mark Twain sitting on that horse, and that's the very kind of thing he would have done on one of his lecture tours to promote his show. And I was shocked to see that picture, but it was clearly him. And so he had a very active career. He lived in England several years toward the end of his life. And the English audiences appreciated him even more than what the American audiences did.
How did you come to be a Mark Twain portrayer?
Well, I was an actor in college and had done some professional work then, and I was taking a summer course in college, and I had to do a project, and I had no earthly idea what I was going to do. And another student in the class says, "Why don't you do a Mark Twain deal?" So I got to digging in it and put together some material and presented it, and then the professors, a group of professors saw it, including Paul Baker, who was the director of theater at the Dallas Theater Center, and they suggested that I do it for the whole college. So I did it with a full production in their theater there at the college, and a producer named A.D. Bowden from Fort Worth saw it, and he signed me to a contract, and we went on the road for a few years.
Very interesting.
And I finally had to give that up because he booked me into some atrocious places, I'll tell you. And my big break was to come. He had lined up a big tour of officers' clubs and country clubs, and Joan Rivers beat me out of that contract. She got the contract and I didn't. And that was when she had been on Johnny Carson about twice, back when she was funny. And then she was hilarious when she first started showing up, and she got the contract and I didn't. And he kept on booking me into sad places to be. And so finally I had to sever that relationship. And since then I've done it mainly just on word of mouth. I've had people call me back 4 or 5 years later. And the Watauga Library in Watauga was one of them that called me back several years later and said, would you come back and do this again? And so that's the way it's been. I've done stuff from Chamber of Commerce, breakfast, commercial productions like the one in Will Rogers, colleges, universities, lots of libraries because it fits in well for them. And that's both just to get people in the library, but also for fundraisers for them. And high schools. It doesn't go as well in high school because the young people today are interested in explosions and quite frankly, a little bit of stuff that's too off color. This is a clean show. You won't be embarrassed if you bring your kids to it at all.
Well, I want to say that you look a lot more like what I think Mark Twain would look like from his photos than you did when you started out portraying Mark Twain, because there's some pictures of you, and you colored your hair, powdered it or whatever, or wore a wig, and did you have a fake mustache?
No, I've had a mustache since I was 21 years old.
But now you've aged into looking really like Mark Twain.
I do look like Mark Twain. I've had people stop me on the sidewalk and in restaurants and stuff and say, you know who you look like? And I say, yeah, Tom Selleck.
I was going to say that too.
But they say, no, it's Mark Twain. And I'm surprised that many people knew what Mark Twain looked like. But now, I started off as a 26-year-old acting like a 70-year-old man. Now I'm a 70-year-old man acting like a 70-year-old man. I don't even have to put on makeup. I look like the guy.
And now you want to give it up.
I think I will. I think I might do a few shows. I don't know if this will be the last one, but
I hope
I'm ready to concentrate on my own writing.
See, now we found out that you're here and you do live in Hopkins County for some time now.
I've lived down here 13 years.
I didn't know we had Mark Twain here until
most
you walked in.
I'm used to not being heard of, believe me. But I hope that after people see the show that they remember it.
There's one from 1972 here, a high school publication, and it says the timely Twain is to appear.
Yeah. Well, I've had it as Mark Twain on stage, Mark Twain Speaks, and the Timely Twain. That particular show was one of the. I've had to stop in the middle of 3 shows, and that was one of them at a high school because a kid in the audience was shooting thumbtacks at me with a rubber band. So, but I was 26 years old, so I stopped the show and told him what might happen after the show if he kept it up. So he quit, and we went on and finished the show. So that was kind of a landmark for me there.
If you'd tell us briefly about this Dallas Blue and your involvement with the Dallas Police Department.
Well, I was a police officer over there for 6 years. I was promoted to field training officer after 2 years, and worked what was then the worst beat in the city of Dallas, training rookie officers, believe it or not. Dallas D Magazine did a story on my beat, and they called it Mean Streets back then. You could probably look it up and find it on the internet. But anyway, when I left the police department, I had started writing. I meant for it to be a funny book, but it didn't turn out to be funny, and I wrote a book called Dallas Blue, and that was not my title for it. That was the publisher's title. They changed quite a few things. And anyway, they published it, and then the publisher declared bankruptcy, owing me $8,000. So I didn't make much off that book, but it was a regional bestseller. John Anders of the Dallas Morning News mentioned it in a column there as the hottest selling paperback in Dallas.
Wow.
And so it sold really well. And I've written some other things. The Black Dirt Struggle at Fairleigh, my wife thinks, is my best work. And then I wrote a coon hunting story based in Fairleigh, and a book about a little crippled boy who had polio named the Mayor Bulldog Gunny. Now, I've had one offer on that, but I wouldn't accept it because the publisher insisted on retaining internet and movie rights, and I wouldn't do that. Okay. I just told them that's tantamount to giving you my work, so I wouldn't let them publish it. So
this publication, which had to do with your 1983 awards banquet with the Dallas PD that you appeared at, the board of directors is mentioned. This is Friends of the Dallas Police. Friends of the Dallas Police. It was an organization that I started. I had a good friend named Charlie Kincaid who was a client of mine. I was a stockbroker, and he was a client of mine, and he brought in a buddy of his named Walter Clark, who owned Walter Clark Advertising, and the three of us launched that from scratch. I think we raised about $75,000 for it, and started it off, put together a board of directors. You want to know who some of the board of directors' names are? Ross Perot, Roger Staubach, Ron Chapman of KVIL, George Schrader, who was... He was the old city manager of Dallas. And others. My goodness. Well, what we must do in the time that we've got left is to talk about your event this Saturday night and the fundraiser that it is. Well, we're doing this. I've done a lot of work, a lot of it, for Friends of the Libraries, because Twain naturally matches up with the library well as fundraisers. Well, after moving down here into the country, I find out that there's probably something that's a little bit overlooked that's very vital to all these communities, and that's the volunteer fire departments. But these young men donate their time, they maintain the equipment, they train, they do all this stuff, and then they have to turn around and raise their own funds. And it occurred to me that there's not such a group as the Friends of the Volunteer Fire Department, a citizens committee that stages 4 or 5 events a year to raise funds for these guys so they don't have to do it. In Cumbie, they have a very nice gathering, which is a stew and an auction, and people donate things to the auction. But still, we need to have committees that do this 4 or 5 times a year for them to make sure that their equipment is the best there is and their training is the best. And so I wanted to, since I'm going out with this thing, I don't intend to keep on doing it. I may do it a few more times for this reason. But I would like to see some volunteer fire departments get some funds. And the way this happens is if you come from Winsboro up there, you will get to designate which part of this goes to whatever volunteer fire department you want. If you come from Cumbie, you can donate your money to the Cumbie deal. So $10 admission at the door. Once your expenses are paid, then the funds remaining will be divided between the fire departments who have sent a representative to ask, or a number of representatives. No, it's not once my expenses are paid. I very well may lose money on it. I've got about $300 in this now. 50% of your ticket will go to a volunteer fire department, and we hope that the other 50% will cover our expenses. Okay. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, good. Well, I think it's a very noble thing that you're doing for the volunteer fire departments, and you're absolutely right about all that you've said about them. And your talent, I just really want to see you Saturday night, and I really love what you've done for, presentations for the public over all these years. And with this American statesman, would you say he was called that?
American
Mark Twain?
statesman. No, he was. I don't understand that, but he was
More like just a comedian.
He was a comedian, and he was the most recognized guy of his time. Nobody gave a banquet. For example, he got to be the banquet speaker for Ulysses Grant's birthday party, and he was the only guy that ever cracked Ulysses Grant up. Grant was a very dour guy, and people said they never even saw him smile. And Mark Twain got him to absolutely laugh uncontrollably.
Oh, lovely.
And the way he did it, have you got time for this little story about Grant?
Very, very short.
Well, he made a salute to babies, and he says, someplace in the world right now there is a baby. Someplace in this country there is a baby who's trying very hard to get his big toe in his mouth. And that's the future leader of our armed forces. And that cracked Grant up.
Well, we'll look forward to your material this coming Saturday evening. Riley Springs Community Center services start at 7.
Services begin at 7, and we'll shovel lots of brimstone.
Thank you, LV, for coming in.
Just before I go, I want to remind people to remember your Riley Springs Jamboree, the third Saturday of every month. It's a piece of Americana. We attend it and we love it.
Thank you.
This is Stephen Payne with KSST News Minute. Construction is nearing completion on Gilmer Street for the Schlotzsky's Deli and Cafe, as well as the Hometown Auto Sales lot. Both have finished exterior building and pavement, lacking only interior work to each business. On the south side of the I-30 bridge on Broadway, ground has been broken for a Starbucks, which will be located next to Chili's, who will be losing the lease on their back parking lot once construction is done. This construction, paired with the city crews that are working on the closed-off stretch of Bill Bradford Road, has caused an increase in traffic flow on Broadway, resulting in more traffic jams during the daylight hours. For businesses along Broadway, traffic jams can create difficulties for the business and consumers. For Walgreens Pharmacy, these traffic jams can create problems for customers already at the establishment when these jams begin to form, such as complaints about drivers who drive through Walgreens too fast in order to access the service road, resulting in cases of minor damage to parked cars. Other establishments, such as Brooks Hearing and Speech Clinic, have also faced problems from traffic jams, often resorting to using Broadway Plaza's secondary entrance for appointments. Businesses on the south side of the overpass also face issues. AT&T authorized retailers sees regular traffic build up every day, and employees and customers leaving the store are often forced to turn right towards Walmart and use Wildcat Way in order to make the trip home. For these businesses and more, many worry that the presence of a Starbucks on the south side of the overpass will only add to the already severe traffic conditions in that area. This has been Stephen Payne with KSST News Minute.
Here's Don with sports.
Lady Cats softball coach David Carrillo opened his softball camp Tuesday afternoon in the multipurpose building. It is made up of 2 groups. First, there's a camp for girls entering 2nd through 5th grades, and then one for girls entering 6th through the 9th grades. Coach Carrillo says the camp, which covers fielding, hitting, and base running, is all about having fun while learning the basic fundamentals of the game. A total of 27 girls were in attendance on Tuesday. The emphasis Tuesday was on throwing and fielding. Coach Carrillo says hitting will be stressed Wednesday and base running and sliding on Thursday. He said if girls can take one thing home from the camp with them to improve on, camp is worth it. Tuesday, Coach Carrillo showed the proper way to throw a softball accurately. Former Lady Cats pitcher Haley Dixon, who will be a senior pitcher next year at Texas Woman's University, showed up Tuesday to help with camp. The entire Lady Cats softball staff, Jennifer Short, Kevin Tanton, and Chris Valdivinos, were also on hand to assist Coach Carrillo with the camp.
Thanks for watching Channel 18 News. Have a great evening.
I went down to my friend's house and I sat down on her stair. She says, "Come on in, Jason, you know my husband just like that. Husband just like sure enough, let me down. Well, my mother, she told just before I was born, say he got a boy child coming and he's gonna be a rolling stone. He'll be a rolling stone. Oh Lord, I'll be a rolling stone. Yeah.